Hello, this is Susan, and for the next half hour, I'll be reading articles from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First article entitled Local Police Who Cooperate with ICE. A half dozen law enforcement agencies are playing ball with federal agents who are targeting migrants, none more so than Cheektowaga police. A half dozen local law enforcement agencies, Cheektowaga police in particular, are cooperating with federal agents as they round up migrants. Sheriff offices in Erie and Niagara counties are also working with ICE and the Border Patrol. The Cheektowaga Police Department heads the list of a half dozen local law enforcement agencies that are cooperating with federal agencies to detain and deport migrants. So far this year, police in the Buffalo suburb have turned over at least 21 people to federal immigration agents after detaining them for low-level offenses like shoplifting. Sheriff offices in Erie and Niagara counties are also working with U.S. Border Patrol and ICE, and so are police in Lewiston, North Tonawanda, and Amherst, though to a lesser extent. Buffalo police do not appear to collaborate with immigration authorities. Mayor-elect Sean Ryan said it's not the job of city cops to enforce federal law. An investigation by Investigative Post found at least 31 migrant arrests this year that involved cooperation between local police and federal authorities, 2/3 the result of Cheektowaga police actions. The total is an undercount. For example, Investigative Post identified 3 cases where the Erie County Sheriff's Office handed over a migrant to Border Patrol, but a spokesperson said the real number is closer to a dozen. The spokesperson, Christopher Horvatitis, declined to provide additional details and refused an interview request. The cooperation follows a pattern. Police stop or detain a migrant for a low-level offense, like a traffic violation or shoplifting. Police saying they need a translator or to verify the person's identity, they call the Border Patrol agents. That's the excuse they use, said attorney Matthew Borowski, who represented migrants in federal proceedings who were first detained by local police. And Border Patrol, of course, while they're there translating, look into their immigration status and detain them. The federal agents then take custody of the migrant, often sending them to the ICE detention center in Batavia. Local law enforcement agencies working with federal authorities defend their cooperation on the grounds they're acting to promote public safety. I think my goal is to keep the community safe, said Niagara County Sheriff Michael Filicetti, who detains migrant women on behalf of ICE and whose deputies occasionally turn migrants over to Border Patrol. Once federal immigration is involved, that is their determination on how they're going to handle things. Cooperation between local law enforcement and immigration authorities is imperfect. However, as in the case of Enrique Buitrago Rojas and his son, on June 24th, Bartrago Rojas and his son, 16-year-old Jamir, were shopping at the Walden Galleria when an employee accused them of stealing $309 worth of clothing. Normally, such a charge results in the police issuing a person a ticket to appear before a town judge. In Buitrago Rojas's case, it resulted in a call to Border Patrol. They called the police, and the police called immigration right away, Buitrago Rojas told Investigative Post. Buitrago Rojas, who had been visiting from New York City, said he and his son were detained by ICE for more than a month, first in Batavia, then in Laredo, Texas. Initially, he said, ICE agents refused to let him call his wife. He and his son were released once federal authorities realized he had a future immigration court date scheduled. They've since returned home, but Buitrago Rojas now wears an ankle monitor. His son is suffering psychological damages. He doesn't leave the house. He's living in fear, he said. In my case, it was racism. They didn't give me any opportunity to speak with them or explain anything. No one spoke Spanish. The truth is, it's very depressing how they treated us like criminals when we aren't. Buitrago Rojas said he still hasn't gotten back the car he drove to the mall that day. In an interview, Captain Jeffrey Schmidt, spokesperson for Cheektowaga Police, defended officers' choice to call Border Patrol and said the department doesn't bear responsibility for what happens to a person after their involvement ends. I have no idea what happens to anyone once they are taken into custody by the federal government, he said. We have no influence over it. President Donald Trump's administration has said it aims to arrest 3,000 immigrants per day, though so far it has averaged about a third of that number. In the 8 counties of western New York, 813 migrants were arrested by ICE between January and mid-October, an average of 3 per day. 83%, data shows, are listed as immigration violators but have no other criminal history. Those figures do not include arrests by Border Patrol agents. The findings of this investigation are based on a review of police reports, court records, and other documents obtained by Investigative Post, as well as interviews with more than a dozen people. In 10 cases Investigative Post reviewed, a migrant was criminally charged for illegally re-entering the country, an offense that often results in deportation. In other cases, police call Border Patrol on migrants who were legally present asylum seekers. At least one American citizen was caught in the dragnet. Paul Lyndon Rittek, a law professor at the University at Buffalo and co-author of an upcoming report on police immigration collaboration, said local police enforcing immigration law could result in due process or constitutional violations. It opens up the door to all sorts of arbitrary arrests and detentions that we would normally never tolerate when it comes to normal policing and law enforcement, he said. The judgments that police officers make, especially when it comes to immigration status, invariably, I think, run up against the problem of racial profiling. Felicia Araga, a Baruch College professor who studies collaborations between police and federal agents, said that such cooperation shouldn't occur. I ultimately don't think that these two systems should be entangling with each other, said Aragia, who authored a 2023 book on the subject. On the criminal justice side of things, we already know that disproportionately Black and brown people are targeted by those agencies. Local politicians have a mixed view on the matter. Cheektowaga Supervisor Brian Nowak, for example, said he did not favor a blanket prohibition banning police from working with immigration enforcement agencies because we need to have that as a tool in the toolbox. However, Nowak said he worries that police aiding in the Trump administration's crackdown could backfire on the town. I don't want to see the town be the local arm of a federal police force, he said. It's not what we signed up for. Representatives for law enforcement agencies told Investigative Post their departments are not behaving any differently now than under prior administrations. From our perspective, our working relationship with Border Patrol is not any different now compared to prior to President Trump's taking office, said Harvotitz, spokesperson for the Erie County Sheriff. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the parent agency of Border Patrol, welcomes the assistance from local law enforcement. In a statement, a spokesperson said that though a whole-of-government approach, the agency routinely coordinates and collaborates with federal, state, county, and local law enforcement agencies to keep border communities safe. In records obtained via the Freedom of Information Law, Investigative Post identified 21 people Cheektowaga police turned over to federal agents between January and November of this year. Among them was an American citizen. On a Tuesday in June, while shopping at the Walden Avenue Walmart with his girlfriend, Augusto Diaz handed his child a toy to play with. The couple later left the store, forgetting to pay for the toy, he said. A Cheektowaga police officer on the scene detained the couple, accusing them of shoplifting. In an interview, Diaz, who has curly hair, tattoos, and speaks with an accent, told Investigative Post an officer began asking him questions about his immigration status. She kept telling me, "Are you a citizen? Are you a citizen?" he said. And I was like, "Miss, what are you talking about? I'm with my girl right now, and you're talking about citizenship?" Diaz returned the toy, but Cheektowaga police took him to their headquarters and charged him with lying to officers. Then they called Border Patrol to investigate his citizenship status. He was released, he said, after agents confirmed he had been born in the Bronx. Diaz now believes he was racially profiled, a charge a Cheektowaga police spokesperson denied. In September, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote in a concurring opinion that federal agents were permitted to conduct brief investigatory stops to inquire about someone's immigration status based on their appearance. The order does not apply to local law enforcement. I'm an American, Diaz said. I can show you my birth certificate, my social security, everything. The girl was being kinda racist. Schmidt, Cheektowaga police spokesperson, said in an interview that his officers don't enforce federal immigration laws. Rather, he said, officers seek to identify those they've taken into custody. We do work with our federal partners when we believe that there is someone who needs to be identified who is not an American citizen, he said. We don't do immigration. We don't enforce the laws. We aren't complicit in what Border Patrol or what ICE does with persons that they take into custody. According to the department's immigration violations policy, officers may contact federal immigration authorities if a person admits they entered the country illegally, if they suspect their immigration documents are forged, or other factors based upon training and experience. The policy states that a person speaking a different language may be considered suspicious, but should not be the sole factor in establishing reasonable suspicion. In practice, arrest reports show officers attempting to determine a person's citizenship status. In August, for example, Officer James Emfield was working an off-duty detail at Walmart when an employee stopped two men suspected of shoplifting. Emfield questioned them in the store's loss prevention office and asked one of them where he was from. Venezuela, the man responded. When Emfield then asked the man if he was legally present in the country, the man replied that he had entered as a refugee. Emfield then called Border Patrol, according to his incident report. Both that agency and ICE arrived at the scene and took custody of the man. In November, Officer Mark Enders was similarly working an off-duty detail at the Walden Avenue Walmart. An employee accused a man of shoplifting, prompting Enders to question him. The man produced a Cuban passport and said he had been living in the country for 3 years. That prompted a call to Border Patrol, who came to take custody of the man. Cheektowaga police assist federal agents in other ways too, as in the case of Mario Marcelo Bosquentabon. In February, he was the passenger in a car that Cheektowaga police pulled over for traffic violations. The driver, 20-year-old Woodison Marcelo Loja, was arrested on charges of drunk driving and a slew of other offenses. He was handed over to Border Patrol, detained by ICE in Batavia, and later deported to Ecuador. Cheektowaga police drove Busquataban home to a house on William Street where he and other migrants lived. They all worked for the owner of the house, Cesar Lama, as roofing and home repair employees. 5 months later, in late July, ICE arrived one morning as Busquentaban and 7 others were loading up a work truck and preparing to leave for a job. The workers ran. Agents deployed tear gas as they chased, beat, and arrested the men. Busquentaban said they'd come for one man and ended up arresting all 8. Everyone, including Busquestaban, was later deported. I worked up there 3 years until they took me, Busquestaban told Investigative Post from Ecuador. I never did anything wrong. I was only there to work, to get my family ahead. Cheektowaga police were on the scene that morning to assist. Lima and Busquataban told Investigative Post. Schmidt, the department's spokesman, said the officers who drove Busquataban home in February would have been prohibited from sharing the address with federal authorities, but he said the police department often responds to requests for assistance from outside agencies, including ICE and Border Patrol. Schmidt said he couldn't locate a specific report affirming Cheektowaga police were on the scene, but said it was very possible that officers were there on standby for safety. Lima, the contractor who owns the house and is a visa holder, decried the cooperation between local police and federal immigration authorities. Last year, he said, was quiet. If police stopped him or one of his workers, they would issue a ticket and let them go. This year, however, they say wait about 15 minutes and then immigration arrives. It's unfair, he said. It's very painful for all the people who are undocumented. Even those with documents are carrying them just because they have a brown or black appearance. Niagara County agencies are also cooperating with ICE and Border Patrol. A review of federal court records turned up 4 cases, 2 in Lewiston and 2 in North Tonawanda, where police called Border Patrol to intervene in a case. 3 men have been deported as a result. A 4th faces that prospect. Then there's the Niagara County Sheriff's Office, which signed an agreement in May to hold ICE detainees at the Lockport Jail. Since May, an average of 5 to 10 women have been held as immigration detainees per day. Sheriff Michael Felicetti said, data compiled by a local researcher found that the jail has held 50 immigration detainees over the past month. The agency earns $148 per detainee per day under the agreement. Deputies are also training to serve warrants on behalf of ICE, according to Felicetti. In an interview, Felicetti and his deputies, he said his deputies contact Border Patrol when they suspect a subject may be in the country illegally. Speaking Spanish isn't the sole reason they may contact federal authorities, he said, but it can be a contributing factor. If you start talking to somebody and they're very evasive and their answers about what's going on, they're unable to provide identification, they don't speak the language, you start piecing things together, he said. In other cases, a migrant is sometimes charged with re-entering the country illegally, a criminal offense. But local police didn't know that when they first stopped them. On April 15th, for example, Amherst police officers conducted a traffic stop around 8:30 a.m. The officers detained two men and called Border Patrol for assistance. 15 minutes later, Border Patrol agents questioned the men about their legal status, ultimately detaining one of them. The man was later ordered deported. Investigative Post found 3 criminal complaints against Erie County Sheriff's deputies that detained a person before handing them over to federal authorities. Horvetius, department spokesperson, said the actual count is greater. Deputies are in contact with Border Patrol dozens of times a year, he said, and so far in 2025 have handed over about a dozen migrants to federal custody. Horvetius said the agency does not keep statistics on how many times that kind of transfer occurs and declined a request for an interview. In other cases, local police collaborate with immigration agents more actively. In April, for example, plainclothesmen Border Patrol agents were staking out a roofing crew driving a work truck in the town of Tonawanda. The agents ran the truck's plates and determined that the registration had expired 7 months prior. They called Tonawanda police and asked them to conduct a traffic stop. The officers complied and issued the driver a ticket. According to the criminal complaint, Border Patrol then arrived on the scene and quizzed the occupants of the truck on their citizenship status. One man had been previously deported twice and was arrested. He was later ordered deported for a third time. Tonawanda Police Chief James Stoffiger did not return calls seeking comment, but Town Supervisor Joseph Eminger said the town's police are not cooperating with immigration agents unless presented with a warrant. We're not doing it just because ICE or Border Patrol has asked us to help them. We're not doing that, he said. If we have a court order saying we've got to do something, then we do it. Eminger did not respond to additional questions about the April case. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post. Your reader has been Susan, and I thank you for listening.
Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. Radio Reading volunteers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books to every blind and print handicapped person to provide the reading radios. We broadcast on the subcarrier signal of WNED-FM Radio Buffalo, and that is provided without charge with the Western New York Public Broadcasting Association. As always, please feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, and any questions you may have, and please stay with us. Our Arena Buffalo News is coming up next.
Good day. The following program